Hey, what's going on everyone? We have the meta snapshot for patch 13.20. There was a small update and multicasters are still the best comp right now. It was super duper good and then they nerfed it a bit, so it's still very good. And let's just get right into the comps. We'll go over how to play all the new comps. We added multicaster and void reroll, and we shifted some stuff around because there were a ton of changes. So Ashe Reroll, very strong, but only play this if you get Ionia Spatula, but if you do, just like hard force it. Multicasters, the one we talked about, Twist of Fate, Talia, things like that are going to be working out great for you with Galio as the main tank. Azir Flex, Azir got like a billion buffs last patch, so he's going to be pretty good again, but he works in a bit of a weird way because he fits in so many different comps, so you definitely have to mix and match units around him. After that, we have Demacia. Demacia, very solid too. In the A tier, we have Cho Bitem, dropped down a bit because they changed him a little bit. Void Reroll, plays on the Cho'Gath concept, but you go into Void instead of Bruiser. Rogue Reroll, still solid. Bilgewater, this one got bumped up from the C tier because they made a lot of changes to that. Gunner Reroll, solid. Vanquishers, nerfed a bunch. Demon Slayer, slight nerf there, but still good. The boss set, still it's decent. Gunners, Shurima, Challengers, Sorcerers, Bastion, Noxus, Neeko Invoker. And then in the B tier, we have Karma and Naafiri still. They haven't really received that much love quite yet. Now that we've gone over the summary, let's get into how to play each and every one of these comps. But first, let's thank the sponsor of this video. Hey, today we have a sponsor that you probably never ever saw before. Raid Shadow Legends. Just imagine if they actually did sponsor this video. With over 800 champions and tons of events and game modes, what more is there to love, especially if it's all played on your phone? So I got my phone here. We're gonna play Kiss, Marry, Kill with a bunch of Raid Shadow Legends characters, so let's get right into it. Today we're gonna look at Harvest Jack, Miscreated Monster, and Rotos, the Lost Groom. I'm gonna have to go with Kiss and Harvest Jack. Pumpkins taste pretty good. It is pumpkin spice latte season after all. For marrying, I'm gonna have to go with the Lost Groom because, you know, everyone needs to find love somewhere, and just because you lost someone before doesn't mean you can't find them again. And then lastly, probably kill the Miscreated Monster because they were miscreated. Probably something went wrong there, so we gotta get rid of them. Everybody likes free stuff, especially when the free stuff is a legendary champion in their favorite game. So check out Sun Wukong, Raid Shadow Legends take on the Monkey King from Chinese mythology. All you have to do is log on 7 different days between now and October 23rd to get him completely for free. No need to slay any demons or do any wild quests. Simply just log on 7 different days and the champion is yours. We all love to show off our style, and in Raid's latest update, there's going to be a new Clan League and Clan Insignia feature. This month is also the return of Prime Gaming drops, so Amazon Prime members can earn themselves some special in-game goodies. After everything you've heard, there's no excuse not to use the link in the description or scanning my QR code to get all of these insane bonuses, and we are talking about Epic Champion Talia and other useful things like energy refills, skill tomes, and XP boosters. That's all you have to do to join in and all the fun on the battlefield, so I'll see you all there. Well, let's get right into the comps right now. We have in the S tier, Ashe Reroll. Again, you really just need the Ionia spat. I would not play it without it, but you are free to do as you wish. The reason why this comp got a lot better despite the Vanquishers being nerfed is because before, a lot of people who were going Xayah were taking all your sets, but now Sett is less contested because fewer people are going Xayah, so you are able to get both Ashe and Sett. The only issue is sometimes the multicasters take Sett, but they've been mainly going for Galio, which is really nice. But essentially, in a meta where there is a lot of 2-cost reroll, a lot of people are going to be playing the multicasters. Ashe Reroll becomes more open too, so they kind of snowball each other into oblivion. Shared pools just kind of make that happen a little bit. It's just kind of how the game works. That's why whenever it's like a 4-cost meta, like everyone's going 4-cost. If it's a 1 or 2-cost reroll, everyone's going 1 or 2-cost. It just kind of works out that way because of how that works. But now onto multicaster reroll. This one is going to be a little interesting because this is going to be a new comp and you have a bunch of new carries. So Twist of Fate, Talia, very solid. I like Twist of Fate more, but if you have space, itemize Talia. Galio going to be the main tank. Just throw a stone plate plus other tank items on him. And even though this comp got nerfed, still very solid. Getting some form of mana penetration is good. That's why you get the static shiv on Sona. But this is like the basic of the comp. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 unit comp. You don't really need 8, which is another really good thing. So you could stay level 6, reroll for everything 3-star, and then move on to level 7 and level 8 later on when you get the time. This comp is very item reliant, so some people like taking the Pandora's items augment by going the Twist of Fate legend, so that's something you could look into because getting blue buff versus no blue buff is a huge difference. Also, Hextech Gunblade versus no Hextech Gunblade on Twist of Fate is another huge difference. But you want to be obviously doing a 2-cost reroll pattern because we're rolling for all 2 costs. And then I have heard some people say you want the Radiant item on Galio, you don't want the Radiant item on Galio. They did nerf it a bit, but unless you have your other Demacias buffed up, I think it's fine just to leave the Radiant item on the Galio. That's why there are only 2 items on him here. Let's go into the how to play section, and in case you guys want to check this guide out a little further, a little more detailed, head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta to get all the updates there. Some people like having it on their second screen as they play, or they just alt tab into it. This comp is still contested. It's not as contested as it was yesterday before they hotfixed it, but still quite a few people go for this. We have a full list of items down here. It's mainly like the blue buff, a damage item, and then Hextech Gunblade. After that, like, you still care about what you get because you're running Pandora's items, but those are the main things that you're going for. And also for augments, all the reroll augments are really good. 2 healthy, obviously absolutely nuts. And then the multicaster augments, which they changed a little bit, are all pretty good. Now onto Azir Flex. So Azir Flex, what does it mean? It's hard to define these things, you know? Azir plus Nasus plus anything. That's how I kind of decide it. But if you look up Azir stats, it's all pretty good. And then whenever you play Azir, you always combine it with a Nasus because they're both Shurimas, and Nasus is also a 4-cost. And then you throw in a secondary carry and call it a day from there. The most popular version is going to be 4 Juggernaut, but again, since you flex between so many different things, you could add in whatever you hit, and that's typically going to be the route that you play whenever you're playing this build. We have some pretty good videos on this, so I'll leave a card in the description on the top right in case you want to check out some coaching games from this, because those will be a lot more helpful than whatever I'm going to be saying here. Next up, we have Demacia. Demacia is very solid right now too. It's one of the best vertical trait comps right now that people often go for, and I don't mean like super vertical as in like 9 Demacia. Obviously 9 Demacia, you like pretty much win the game, but it's really hard to get. But I'm talking about most of the 7 traits. Demacia probably the best one right now because Fiora is still pretty solid, and then you combine that with a Quinn. Some people even are playing Kale right now, but there are a bunch of different ways to play it. Obviously, if you get the Demacia crest, the comp becomes much better, and I wouldn't really play it without it, so just keep that in mind whenever you're approaching this build. But it's just standard leveling pattern because you're going for 4 costs, and then you want to have a variety of different carries, and then if you get a ton of Quins, you could go ahead and re-roll Quinn. Again, I'm going to remind you guys every time I make this video, make sure you only put 2 items on your Demacia units because you want them to get the Radiant items. Next up, we have A tier, Cho Bitem, still very good. They changed him a little bit. I wouldn't say it's like an overall nerf, it's more of a rework, but the net effect was a nerf at the end of the day because they reduce his stacks at 3 stars, which definitely does affect him, but they increase his stacking at 1 star. So it's a little less risky to play. Also, fewer people are going for this, I think, so it's a pretty good time to go for Cho'Gath builds if you didn't get a chance to before. What you want to do is just do a full 1-cost reroll in order to get the comp going, so pretty much do not touch your level up button until you hit Cho'Gath 3, Cassiopeia, or Malzahar 3, and then preferably Renekton 3 as well. But Cho'Gath is going to be the main monster there. One thing a lot of people do when they do 1-cost reroll is that they roll down to 30 gold at stage 3-1. That's right after the Krugs. And the reason why is because that's the last stage you're level 4 on. I've seen so many people message me their games and then they're like, hey, why am I not hitting? What am I doing wrong with 1-cost reroll? And I ask them if they leveled up. They say no, but then I watch their game and they did level up before that point. And then I'm like, you can't level up there. So always make sure that you do not level up when you're doing 1-cost reroll because it really messes up the odds by a ton. And you might also be surprised at what levels still make that mistake. I won't spoil it because I don't want to make anyone feel bad, but you really have to make sure that you don't level up because I feel like a lot of people watching this might be misplaying it without knowing it. But yeah, for 1-cost reroll, pretty much never level up until you hit everything. Items for Cho'Gath, non-negotiable as well. Bramble Vest plus Dragon Claw plus a healing item, which is Redemption or Anima Visage. You just need it, not much else to say there. Cassiopeia or Malzahar or Silco, you want blue buff on them, and then just any damage or AP items. After that, we have Void Reroll. This is another Cho'Gath reroll comp. Same items on him, but this time you're going 6 Void, 2 Bruiser instead of 6 Bruiser. And this one's pretty interesting as we're about to learn. There's not really a completely set leveling pattern. It's kind of similar to how we played Rogues before, so this one you are allowed to level up on. But you generally just slow roll at level 5 and you skip the level 4 roll down that we did in the previous build. And when we do that, we go for Cho'Gath 3, Kassadin, and Vel'Koz. So level 5 gets you more units because you aren't really focused on the Malzahar Malzahar, you're not really focused on the Renekton. Obviously, you could still get Malzahar if he happens to come by, but it's not as important because you want to focus more on Vel'Koz. So pretty much you're just slow rolling the whole game at level 5, and then once you get Cho'Gath 3, you level up to level 6 or 7, and then get Vel'Koz after that. Eventually, you should have Cho'Gath 3, Vel'Koz 3, Rek'Sai 3, and sometimes Kassadin and Malzahar 3. It really helps to have a +1 Void whenever you're playing Void, so if you get, that way you don't need to find Kai'Sa, and then eventually you could happen to get Bel'Veth and then play 8 Void. It's obviously really good whenever you're playing a trait comp to get one of the trait augments. I don't think I need to be saying that, but it's just how the game kind of is, so I need to mention it just to reiterate it. But this comp is pretty playable without the spatula, which is why I think this comp is pretty decent right now. Next up we have is Rogue Reroll, so same leveling pattern as the Cho'Gath Void Reroll. You want to just roll at level 5 and be in kind of between the 1 and 2 cost reroll state. So slow roll for everything, Graves 3 and Kiana, and then this is what the final board looks like for Rogue: Graves, Echo, Katarina, and Kiana, and then you could throw an Ixtal with Neeko. You definitely want Slayer for Kiana, so that's why you drop in Quinn. And then Gunner's pretty decent with Graves, and Jinx is also a low cost unit, so she's easy to find. Obviously, you want stuff like Vampiric Blades. Healing is generally good on rogues, so either Healing Orbs, Cybernetic Leech, Harm Assist are all pretty solid in this build. And then you can always cap out your late game with like a 3-star Katarina or Echo and itemizing them as well. So in the beginning, very strong because Graves is good. In the mid game, very strong because Kiana's good. And then in the late game, very strong because you get another 3-cost 3-star. And hopefully that should be enough to carry the game for you. Next build up we have is Bilgewater Nilah. So this comp jumped back up. Bilgewater's always been in a weird spot. It's either the best comp or the worst comp. Now it's actually the first time it's in the middle. So very interesting there. Nilah, really good with RFCs. So you go Twisted Fate, you go Pandora's items, and then you get 2 RFCs on her because she is just absolutely nuts with this item. They also disabled scope weapons, so you can't pick that anymore. So that's why there's an even bigger need for rapid fire cannon. After that, 3 Bilgewater is fine. You could go more, but 3 seems to be the sweet spot right now. After doing a data check, 5 Bilgewater is okay, but worse than 3, and 7, don't do 7. 9 is good though, but it's really hard to get 9. So the way you play this comp is that you need Pandora's items to get the RFC. Without it, she sucks too much. And then in stage 4, once you sell Nilah, you sell your item holder right away, drop it on her, and go from there. There are other usable items. You don't want to greed too much and lose too much HP. If you could build misfortune items, build them, but for everything else, leave it to be building RFCs for Nilah. The rest of the comp is just generic good units. So you run Ashe for Vanquisher to give Vanquisher to Nilah, and then since you're running Ashe, might as well run Freljord with Sejuani, and then since you're running Sejuani, might as well run Sion because he's also a bruiser, and then after that, Nautilus for Bilgewater, MF for Bilgewater, and then you add in Strategist with Jarvan, and then the Aatrox for Juggernaut. So there's a lot of different things you could kind of splash in here. You don't have to run this exact comp. Just make sure you have at least 3 Bilgewater and 2 Vanquisher, and you're going to be good from there. Luckily, a lot of the Bilgewater traits complement with a lot of good high cost units. For example, Jarvan and Aatrox are both playable in this build, and that makes it a lot easier to kind of flex into this build. But let's go into the next comp, which is going to be Gunner, Jinx, and Jayce reroll. This one's going to be a 4 Gunner build for Zon, and you want to focus on them one at a time. So some games you get Jinx 3 for free, some games you get Jayce 3 for free. You don't really get to decide which. Luckily, they use pretty much the same items, and then if you're getting lucky that game, you could go for both of them. So at some point, after you have like 6 units of one of them, that's when you should kind of focus on one of them over the other. So if you get like 6 Jayces, but only have like 3 Jinxes and you're level 6, probably try to go up to level 7 and roll for Jayce 3 instead. But if you have a lot of Jinxes, stay level 6, finish the 2-cost reroll, get Jinx 3, then move on to Jayce later. It's also pretty important to complement this build with a bunch of different traits. So you really want 4 Gunner, kind of hard to get because you need Aphelios for it. So it does get a little tricky sometimes. And you also want 4 Zon, same issue there with the Silco because they're both 4 costs. You don't often hit them when you're level 6, and you often don't have room for them until you level up. So that's why you only want to focus on one of them instead of both, because if you get one of them, then you could power level up and fit all the units into the comp. Because I know a lot of people were asking me a couple weeks ago, like, why not both? That's mainly the reason why. If you ever do have questions, go ahead, leave them down in the comments below, and also like share the video with your friends if you found this helpful. One thing to note about this comp in particular is that if you do get robotic arm, the comp becomes like infinitely better. It's like Jinx's best best modification or augment, whatever you want to call it. I always thought of augments as part of like a Zon thing, but they obviously can't use the same name for two things. But essentially the main point of this build is to econ early on, stabilize sometime during stage 3 with Jinx 2, and then start slow rolling after that. That's pretty simple to play, so pretty solid comp if you're kind of newish to the game. Next up we have is Demonflare. Only play this with the Demonflare augment for Swain. It's really good. I believe they did nerf it like a tiny bit since last patch, but essentially you just reroll for Swain, and since everyone's going 2-cost reroll, it's not that hard to hit, but sometimes people steal your Swain. Sometimes the multicasters are like, give me that Swain. They don't really care too much about you, and then you're like, oh dang, like what am I gonna do? Well, the only thing that you could do is pray that they focus on Galio and then skip the Swain 3. You want to run 6 Sorcerers with this comp because you want to buff up Swain as much as possible, and that's the easiest way to do that. Some people run 3 Noxus. You don't have to, but it is an option if you want to try it. You take out the Voids and put in Noxus instead. But the best item by far on Swain is going to be Titan's Resolve, and then after that, like Bloodthirster's good because his HP pool gets so big, so he gets like a ton of shielding from the Bloodthirster, and he also deals damage, so he heals from it as well. So overall, like very solid build if you want to go for the hero augments. The boss is also pretty good right now. The boss is very similar. You just go for the Titans as well, plus a healing item, and then in this build you focus on 6 Ionia, 4 Vanquisher. It's just like a Xayah build, but Sett as a main tank. Only do this with the boss augment again because Sett 3 alone doesn't really work out that well, but still a solid build at the end of the day. Let's move on into the next build, which is Vanquishers. So Vanquishers is going to be a very similar comp to the one we just went over, but this one's focused on Xayah, not so much the Sett. So you want Shen as your main tank, Xayah as your main damage carry, and then Nilah as a secondary carry. Pretty simple 4-cost comp. It got nerfed a lot. It was one of the best comps of the last patch, but overall still a solid build. Nothing to kind of scoff at. Next build up we have is Gunners. So Gunners, you really only want to play with Piltover. So if you look at data for Gunners, you might notice that it's like pretty high. So you might be thinking like, hey, why is this not S tier? Well, because most of the time you want to be playing Piltover whenever you're doing this. So the only time people actually do go for Aphelios is if they have Piltover in the early game, and if they do, well, like who says no to that? You know, it's like a big econ augment at the start. So if you only go for this, if you get that, the data is going to look a little bit better. Just build any attack damage or attack speed items on Aphelios. You should be fine there. Hextech Gunblade's pretty good on most backline carries, and then you want to run Sejuani main tank and eventually switch to Scion and then run a bunch of legendaries to complement the Aphelios. 4 Gunner is preferred because he's your main source of damage, and then after that, just throw in a bunch of support or tank units like you see in this picture here. Oh yeah, and for the cash out, you want to wait till your very last life. So if you're ever between like 13 or less life, that's when you want to roll down and stabilize your board to cash out the Piltover trait. Next up we have is Shurima. They've been buffing this a bunch, but it's not enough quite yet. Whenever you're playing a vertical trait, you really want to get like a +1 of that trait. So getting like Shurima Crest, things like that really helps it out a ton. So I don't really go for vertical traits unless I kind of get that. Same with Sorcerers. Like we're probably going to go over Sorcerers the next comp. It's just because a lot of the units, like they may seem like they're doing something, but they're really not. Like you're running Renekton, you're running Naafiri, you're running Talia. Like they're just very low cost units, and they're just higher impact units in the game that makes this comp a little bit weaker. But let's say, for example, you had a Shurima spat. You could literally just run like an extra legendary. Like I could just run Aatrox instead of Warwick and Renekton, for example. And then since I'm replacing 2 units with that, I could just add in a Heimerdinger, you know? So that's why vertical traits, like they are very fun to play. They're very beginner friendly, but if you get the +1, they become like infinitely better. So you always have to keep that in mind whenever you're playing this. I'd say the only mandatory item is going to be either a Gwynsu's or a Nashor's. Both of them are really good, obviously, and combining them together is even better, but at least have one of them. If not, I wouldn't really go for this comp because it's just way too weak otherwise. Tank items can go on either Nasus or Jarvan. I prefer Nasus in the Shurima build, but in the Azir Flex build, you could do either or. And then later on, you could get even bigger late game tanks with Cassante, really good with a bunch of different items. So next up we have is Challengers. So this is going to be Fiora and Kai'Sa. Fiora and Kai'Sa, they are a little bit weaker right now. They keep changing Fiora a bunch, so that's a really weird thing that kind of affects her. But this comp has definitely seen better days. But if you get them for free, you get them for free. Next build up we have is Sorcerers. Sorcerers are another vertical trait comp, so only play this with +1 Sorcerers in most cases. Like, yeah, you could go for it, but you're probably going to go like 5th without the +1, unless you just hit everything for free. But if you hit everything for free, anything in TFT is going to work. You have 2 late game options whenever you're playing this. You could either go for an RE 2-star or a Vel'Koz 3, because definitely having Silco 2-star alone isn't enough. Silco is great in double carry comps. Unfortunately, not that great as a solo carry, so that's how how he kind of differs from some of the other characters in this set. That's because he's kind of like a slow damage dealer. You want something to kind of like finish things off a little bit faster because it kind of accelerates its timeline. Next up we have is Silco, Bastion, and Aphelios. So again, duo carry comp with Silco, this time paired up with Aphelios, and then you have some stall in the front. Not a bad build, a little less popular right now, but still very decent. You definitely want to go Vladimir because you want Ascension. Ascension is just what brings this comp to the very next level. Next build up we have is Noxus Reroll. It's seen better days. They've been nerfing it a bunch, so Samira, Cassiopeia, things like that. Not as strong as it was before. Your Swains are kind of getting taken too by the Multicasters, even though Swain's not like the main part of that build. So it's kind of suffering from both nerfs and collateral damage from other comps in the meta, but you just want to do 1-cost reroll, get Samira 3, get Cassiopeia 3, go to level 6, get Swain 3, sometimes you get Naafiri 3, go from there, and then later on you get Mordekaiser as like your late game insurance. Next build up we have is Neeko Invoker. I believe this is the last comp we're going to go over in the A tier. This one has 4 Bastion, 4 Invoker, and then you run Neeko and Soraka. This comp got nerfed heavily, so that's why it's at the bottom right now, but it's still playable if you get everything for free, especially since everyone's going 2-cost reroll. You have a Soraka that's also a 2-cost, but none of the other comps we've seen so far even use Soraka, so you should theoretically get her for free. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's a pretty high chance for it too. If you don't, unlucky, and also not that many people are playing Neeko. Next build up we have are the B tiers. Karma reroll. Invokers did get buffed, but she still sucks. Wouldn't really play her that much. And then Naafiri reroll. Probably pass on that as well until they kind of change that. So let's move up back to the top. I'm actually going to change the tier list a little bit. I'm going to move Demacia down to the A tier. Perhaps I should have given it a little bit more time to cook. Maybe I'm getting impatient. I'm pretty sure it's just like another multicaster patch. It's not like as dominant as it was before. I don't think this is like one of those things that you should only go for this or anything like that. Like with the Cho'Gath stuff, Cho'Gath was much stronger than multicasters are now, I think. So unironically, it might be a bit of a diverse patch. It might be because there's nothing like totally dominating. And like if you get certain augments, like obviously you could go for a lot of weird things. So maybe it's a pretty good patch. I'm going to be playing hopefully a bunch this weekend. I do plan on like streaming maybe on Saturday, tomorrow, or even later today on Friday. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this, and don't forget to check out Raid Shadow Legends using the promo here up here in the corner. And I will see you all in the next video.